After today's module on junk behaviors, you will be able to define and identify junk behaviors, define, identify, and demonstrate the wait strategy, define, identify, and demonstrate the pivot, define, identify, and demonstrate the prompt, and demonstrate how to handle junk behaviors in general. Junk behavior is any behavior that is mildly problematic, moderately disruptive, and inconsequential. The only purpose junk behavior serves is either get your attention, someone else's attention, or just is a habitual behavior that is related to boredom or self-stimulation, such as picking one's nose. Junk behavior includes all problematic behaviors, with the following exceptions. A behavior that is dangerous is not considered junk behavior. We would not consider hitting or using objects as weapons or running into a bus lane as junk behavior. Junk behavior is also not behavior that functions for a specific reason. That is, problem behaviors that reflect a specific need or deficit are not considered junk behaviors. Typically, a behavior plan will designate which challenging behaviors are which and what interventions apply for each behavior. Now that we know what junk behaviors are, the question is, what do we do about them? It is important to note that the interventions we use to deal with junk behavior are also interventions that we might use during a number of other situations, outside of dealing with just junk behavior. In a nutshell, these interventions include the wait procedure, prompting, and providing reinforcement, which is positive feedback skillfully. Behavior plans and protocols all use these procedures in an individualized fashion, so learning to use them for junk behaviors can lead to generalization of these skills in different situations as well. What we absolutely don't do when junk behaviors occur is use coercive strategies. Nor do we just talk to the student about the problem behavior, even in a funny and positive fashion. If their junk behavior is motivated to get your attention and you give them even a little bit of attention, this could very well increase the probability that more junk will occur in your presence, not less. Our purpose with these interventions for junk behavior is to increase appropriate behaviors, which generally results in a reduction of junk behaviors. When junk behaviors are reduced, more learning takes place. The more junk behaviors, the less learning and cooperation. Let's see whether this next clip demonstrates the proper way to deal with junk behaviors. Tom, did you just flick that piece of paper?
No.
I just saw you flick that piece of paper. What is wrong with you?
This is boring. I don't want to do this anymore.
This is boring. Do you think this has any relationship to the direction you're going in life?
I don't think it has anything to do with anything.
Where do you think you're going to be in 3 years if you don't get to work?
Not here.
Right. Yeah. You may be in some deep cell, buried in a jail somewhere out in the middle of the wilderness where nobody could find you. Get to work so we can avoid those things. So how was that junk behavior handled? Take a moment and think about which kinds of coercive strategy interactions you saw and who got the most attention in that scenario. Again, avoid the adage here that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. How this problem behavior was dealt with is not how we handle things at Atlantic Academy, nor is it best practice. So instead of using coercion or talking incessantly to the child when they are using junk behavior, what should we do? The basis for all these interventions is that at the time the junk behavior occurs, we ignore the behavior itself, which means we say and do nothing to the student about the behavior. We act like the behavior is not happening at all. Why should we ignore this behavior, you might ask? Shouldn't they be told that their behavior is inappropriate or unacceptable? Remember that from the coercion training, we spoke about the probable history that these students have with adults responding to their problem behaviors in a coercive manner. Our society, educational systems, and caregivers typically respond to problem behaviors with attention that is intended to get problem behaviors to go away. But do these responses work for our kids, and at what cost? The kids that we get are living proof that these approaches don't work, hence their enrollment in our program. So again, we are not here to repeat what has been ineffective for these students, which is offering a lot of attention, usually the coercive kind, to students' problem behaviors. We strive to avoid insanity at Atlantic Academy by doing something different than what's proven to be ineffective. The wait strategy is when we withhold all of our attention from a student's behavior. This is really an important point here, that we are not ignoring the student, we are simply withholding attention and ignoring the behavior itself. Withholding attention and using the wait means that we are acting like the behavior has not occurred at all, that it has no impact on us whatsoever. So this may require a certain amount of acting on our part, where we really ensure our body language and our nonverbal behavior is reflective of this principle. The wait strategy also implies that we are actually waiting and being covertly watchful of when the student engages in an appropriate behavior or stops the junk so that we can turn back our attention at the right time. A variation of the wait, which you will see in an example in an upcoming clip, is that we continue on with the activity despite the junk behavior. So the junk behavior occurs, we say or do nothing about that behavior and just continue on with that activity, drawing attention to the activity itself. This is a variation of the wait. The pivot strategy involves actually turning our attention and maybe even our physical proximity to something or someone else in the environment when the junk behavior occurs. So when my student begins to engage in junk behavior, such as whining or dropping on the floor, I might pivot away and praise another student in the group, or look at something else, such as a data sheet, to actually show that my attention is unavailable when they engage in these behaviors. The prompt strategy is when I provide a very brief 2 to 7 word statement of instruction about what the student should do. So if the student engaged in junk behavior or problem behavior, I am not saying, "Stop doing that," or "No running, don't yell." What I might say as a prompt instead is, "Sit down, walk please, pick up your book," or even, "What do you need?" These are all clear and concise instructions and directives, which are meant to remind the student in a non-coercive way what they can do. And remember from the Positive Foundation series, and using our attention skillfully, we are aiming to develop a history with our kids wherein they have learned that cooperative behaviors work for them, as more valued feedback and attention and a wider world is available when they are cooperative and appropriate. So my child engages in junk behavior, I say nothing or do nothing in regards to that junk. I might use the wait procedure immediately, I might pivot away, or I might prompt. Another thing to note here is that my prompt can include a nonverbal gesture, such as pointing to a chair to sit down, or it can involve a prompt towards a written expectation or visual reminder. If my kid begins to whine, and it has been determined that such whining functions to obtain help from others, I will actively teach them to ask for help instead of whine. So when they whine, I might prompt a visual card that reads, "Help me," as a reminder to use that skill. So it's important to note that the wait, pivot, and prompt does not have to happen in order. Your student might engage in junk behavior, and you start with a prompt such as pick up a book or pick a book. If they don't pick the book up and engage in whining or complaining, I then can simply employ the wait strategy for approximately 5 to 10 seconds so as to avoid nagging. Then prompt again, but maybe in a different way, such as, which book do you want to start with? So these strategies could really be used in a back and forth fashion for quite some time. Another strategy that we use here is to withhold attention from the junk behavior, act like it isn't happening at all, and instead reinforce appropriate behavior, even when junk behavior is going on. For example, a student may be sitting at their table making inappropriate comments. Instead of attending to those comments, I might give feedback for them sitting and appearing ready to read. So even when they are making inappropriate comments, I might say, "Hey, nice work getting your book open." Then I might prompt, "Turn to page 10. At any time, if the prompts or feedback to appropriate behavior results in increased junk behavior, we would switch to the wait procedure. The next step to handling junk behavior, and perhaps the most important component of using our attention skillfully, is that at any time when appropriate behavior occurs or the junk behavior stops, we provide immediate feedback. If we have pivoted away from the junk, then it stops, we immediately pivot back and provide valued feedback, which can include behavior-specific praise or moving closer to our student, resuming a topic of conversation that is interesting to them, etc. If the junk occurs again, go through the steps again. A day working with our students should entail hundreds of run-throughs of these basic interventions: waiting, pivoting, prompting, and reinforcing appropriate behaviors. One last thing to note. Sometimes I have seen junk behavior occur for long periods of time, or any kind of problematic behavior occur for a long duration, and staff do a fine job using the wait procedure, but they might use it too long. Generally, we would not go longer than 2 to 3 minutes of using just the wait and pivot without some sort of prompt. You can think of a prompt in this context as being a reminder or a sort of lifeline that functions as a reminder to the student to follow a directive and thus receive your attention. Ideally, a student's behavior plan or student-specific protocols would outline just how long we need to wait for or the criteria for resuming our attention. For the next clip, let's see how it all comes together. Refer to your junk behavior document and be ready to write down what each junk behavior was in concrete terms, then what kind of strategy was used.
Hey, Monica, what are you reading over here?
I'm reading this thing about pictures.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, what do you like about it?
Oh, talks about how they get their pictures taken, how expensive it is.
What are you reading over here, Tom? It's sexual harassment. Is that a penis? So how far are you in this book?
Oh, I'm halfway through.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Well, keep up the good work. Nice. Tom, if you need anything, let me know, okay? Okay, sir. All right.
Let's go over the questions that you just answered. Number 1. The junk behaviors were flicking paper and making an inappropriate comment about the flyer. Number 2. Did you catch the specific strategies for each junk behaviors? Flicking paper resulted in me using the wait and the pivot strategy. Then when the student made an inappropriate comment, I pivoted away again. Hopefully you notice me waiting and ignoring the junk behaviors and acting as if they didn't happen at all. Number 3, another important thing to remember, if you pivot away, do you remember to pivot back for appropriate behaviors? In the clip, once a student picked up the flyer, I pivoted back and provided attention. Then again, I pivoted back after he made inappropriate comments and resumed reading the flyer. Number 4. Were there any appropriate behaviors to reinforce in this clip? I hope you spotted some. The peer who was quietly reading, I gave attention to. When the other student picked up the flyer, I provided attention. When the student read the flyer after he made an inappropriate comment, I also provided attention. Handling junk behaviors in a group follows the same general procedures. They're still waiting, prompting, and reinforcing appropriate behaviors. However, the pivot becomes perhaps even more helpful, as you will see in this next clip. While watching this next clip, please be ready to write down what the junk behaviors are and what strategies were used.
Guys, we're going to open up your books to page 4, and then you'll be on page 15. Okay? If you need any help, let me know. So go ahead and put your name up here. Kate, page 4, please. Good. How's your weekend? Yeah. Go ahead and do the first 4 problems. If you need any help, let me know. We're working up towards going to recess here. Nice. All right, guys. You're going to be reading your book. Kate, please put that down. Kate, put that down. He is he's actually working today. You're going to do this page, okay? All right. I would like to see some actual work from you today. All right. Kate. Okay, the attitude. We don't need it today. Please get to work. Hey, give me this, please. Give me this. All right. Hey, if we're not going to be working now, we're going to be working during recess. And if this continues, you know what will happen at the end of the day. I don't want to have to write a note home to your mom today, okay? Please get to page 4.
Okay, the job today is to make towers of 10. And also, we've been counting to 10, but today we're going to do patterns. So, for example, I can do dark green, light green, and what will go next? Like dark green again.
Your butt.
Light green. And then dark green again. How many do I have so far? Help me count.
1, 2, butt,
3,
butt,
4,
and butt.
5. So this would be
Butt.
6. And then 7. How many more till 10? 8. 9. And here. Oh, would you great job. Put that 10 point on, and we have our first tower with a pattern. Nice job. Okay. Now, what's your favorite color? I like the way you're sitting in this.
Orange.
Orange is that's a great color. Okay, so orange, maybe you want to do orange, green, purple. We can do an ABC pattern this time. Good job. What do you need next?
Okay, you get cut.
By now, you have seen a lot of examples of how to handle junk behavior. how to use the weight, the pivot, prompt, and using reinforcement in your attention skillfully. You have seen these strategies used in group settings and working one-on-one with a student. You have also seen a couple of examples of what not to do, which simply is talking to the student when they are engaged in junk behavior and generally giving them both nonverbal and verbal forms of attention regarding their junk behavior. At Atlantic Academy, we have behavior plans and protocols that indicate which behaviors are junk and which are not. In some cases, not all problem behaviors will be captured on a behavior plan, so knowing when to use these strategies and how to use them will be critical to our success with students. You should be ready now to demonstrate using the weight, the pivot, the prompt, and providing feedback to appropriate behaviors. After your document for junk behavior is filled out, schedule a time with either the teacher, the behavior analyst, or JED to get tested on competently demonstrating these strategies.